Puzzle of El Nino billions is what also is on the front page of the Standard this morning. As you can see it right now, government set aside 10 billion shillings to mitigate the effect of heavy rains. However, county governments have been told to adjust their allocations to help victims. Governors are up in arms, but the deputy president is adamant as the big boys trade blame Wananchi as suffering. So, where is the money? That is the abiding question. We have a story on page 2. And there is also a bite, you just run it by you, where the deputy president is saying that we are therefore shocked to see governors complaining that they are yet to receive money for El Nino from the national government. Such money is not forthcoming. This is what is now the verbal barbs that are being bandied around. And we have the governor, the Council of Governor Chair, Runway saying, we note with concern public utterances that suggest that county governments have received funds from the national government to support the mitigation of the devastating impact of the El Nino rains. We were here before, and just ran you by the editorial cartoons that we had. I didn't show you also what we have on the front page of the Daily Nation, how Treasury gifted farms 5 billion shillings for air. We shall be discussing just briefly on this as well. We didn't run you by the dailies much earlier, should say. Mount Kenya MP's claim Mungiki is back in full swing, and governors differ with Rigathi over El Nino billions is the story that you need to follow as well. And just to see also the editorial cartoons, what funds? We can see that their ark is down under the water. This is the counties. They're flooded, but the county government's canoe is up there. What funds they're asking? Which funds? What funds are we talking about? Bilo, what funds? That is which one? 10 billion shillings? Where is it? Who is fooling whom? Let's begin from there. This is circus. I mean, we were talking about El Nino and preparedness, and counties were saying we are ready. Some other counties even were thinking of purchasing motorboats. Right, we knew Nairobi County was to get some motorboats as well, but there is no money. We had all these huge plans. Did the statement of the president take away the drive to make sure that we are prepared? So here we're caught.
Yeah, interesting. Yesterday we had
we
had about 10 minutes discussions with my students, and I was asking them, if we didn't declare that El Nino and it happens, we'd probably be worse off. Here we declared we should have been prepared ourselves. And it's important that you have professionals. And when we have a department, a meteorological department, it's a responsibility to advise the government of the day. Mm-hmm. And one of the students was saying it was because the information we get about drought, the information we use about water, we make certain decisions. And somebody was saying, do I plant this crop or that? Now, having said that, and I'll be talking in a conference after here, the sad thing is all these resources now going to waste. This El Nino is going to waste. And my thinking here, we could even have prepared to harvest this water. In the next 6 months, we'll have drought. We have drought. And it's like we don't learn. We don't get it. So I'm not even worried whether there are funds or not, because that's not something we should be waking up. We know, and the party is very clear, after a certain period, we have these wrong lanes. But we should see them as something we can manage, something we can use to really cushion ourselves when it's a dry season. So whether there are funds on there, I think to me that's a lot of, I don't know how to put it at this level, because it to me is like, I'm looking for a good word to use here, but let me say that it's chicken play. It's not the issue right now. And the question you asked at the end of the day, people are dying because we didn't take responsibility. Mm-hmm. What's the difference between that and genocide? Yeah, because literally we are killing Kenyans. There are 2 officers from Kenya Revenue Authority who drowned. And I think the government at the day, let's step back and make this thing more seriously. It's not a question we got the money, is whatever. You don't get your house burning and you start asking who burned the house. First put out the fire, then we bring it down.
All right.
So I think it's something we're handling poorly, and it's something you put in a scorecard, And step back. It was a very interesting cartoon, social creep. And they say one of the few times somebody has said the truth. And they were saying about don't look the messages of your wife or your husband in your cell phone. It doesn't help you when you don't know something. Let's take an attitude where we are giving positiveness in this country. We are really ensuring the most vulnerable are ring-fenced. And that's what it's all about, Nino, safety net.
Right.
And he says now in Wajir, in those areas, very rich in soil, we just lack water. Now it's flooded.
Below,
I think
situation.
In many countries, particularly developed countries, if government mismanages natural disasters like this one, the way this government is doing, they will resign or forced out. I'm telling you, you've seen it, earthquakes or whatever, flood. This is a very, how you manage disasters is one of the fundamental ways in which you look at the performance of a government, because this is an emergency. And this is why in our constitution we provided for emergency fund, both levels of government, that they should put money aside for this kind of disasters. But the sad thing here is not just the lack of the story about lack of money, but the circus around it. We were told the El Nino is coming, it's not coming. Money has been released, money is not released, especially by the national government. I mean, the way the national government is taking this matter so casually, you know, both in the prediction of this El Nino and even in the now allocation of the money. The government's deputy president announcing in Mombasa that the money has been released. You governors, why are you not spending the money? The following day saying no money is going to go. This, you know, in terms of chapter 6, this is serious, really a matter that you cannot, as a deputy president of a nation, say one thing today and say another thing tomorrow. And as far as I'm concerned, in fact, the government has abdicated its responsibility to the people of Kenya. Northeastern, for example, Mandera, where I come from, county, 30 days now, no road, completely cut off. The main highway is cut off, no vehicles going, no food is going on. There's crisis. The airstrips have been the same. Bojia now is cut off. Garissa from yesterday's, you know, floods, you've seen what has happened. And people have been complaining, crying daily. The president or his deputy do not find it fit to even visit these places. It's like they're not part of this country. You keep going to some places because that's where you got your votes. This is not the way to run a country. You are elected as the leader of this country. Every part of this country deserves attention. And you must go and visit when there are disasters. This is how when you test the leader, is when there's a problem. So the deputy president is in charge of disaster management. That is his docket. Instead of sitting around and flip-flopping on messaging, he should go and visit these places. We want to see him on a boat in Wajir, you know, on those flooded places, in Mandera, in Tana River, in Nyando area. People are crying, where's government? I mean, it's sad when you see the pictures every evening. Kenyans crying. We have the military, engineering department. By now, we would think you can mobilize. We have NYS, we have engineering outfit. The government has resources.
Trying to fix the problem quickly.
Yes, you can summon parliament, allocate money for emergencies. You can reallocate money. You can call parliament tomorrow. So I think this is a disaster, and the government has singularly failed in management of this disaster. And really they need to, they owe an explanation and apology to the people of Kenya. This is not acceptable.
Right. So we have legislators who are saying now the government actually should call this a national disaster. Do you think the threshold has been reached for it to be a national disaster?
And El Nino is a disaster.
Yeah, it's a disaster.
Yes.
Assessment.
Yes. I hear what my colleagues have said, but there is need for government to do a better game of not just talking about planning, but planning and actually mobilizing resources for it. But I have a worry also about county governments, unless they say they are led to believe that they can do the planning, but that the funding will come entirely from national government. You'd expect they can do a little bit, but the scale of some of it, like in the northeastern, may far supersede what counties can do. But perhaps counties can do the humanitarian thing of housing those who have been displaced or providing for food. Choppers are used so often in this country now.
Right.
Even to deliver a few exam papers that you can carry on your shoulder, because of the need to get there, they are able to get there by chopper. You'd expect they can actually deliver some essential supplies and so on. There is something that even the county governments can do. I don't think they should look at each other, the blame game and so on. But the miscommunication, I'm sure that the Deputy President must have gone back and read the riot act to his underlings who provided him information for him to come out that specifically and then again to have to backtrack. I think it was great that he backtracked publicly so that there's nothing, the heat is a lot. I think it takes courage to do that, but is there any lesson being learned from it that we don't run government that way?
So I'm just looking for the next IBEC meeting. Meeting the same governor. How is it going to be given this scenario that is here? I don't know. Should that be part of a discussion? They should have called maybe an emergency IBEC meeting, or when does IBEC meeting really come into play? When we have a looming disaster like this, and there is warning written on the wall. Met Department has given the indication that even the World Meteorological Department has said we're going to be in this particular plight until April next year. And we see this ping pong that is happening between the Deputy President and the governors. Where does IBEC really help?
No, you see, IBEC has a specific mandate in the Constitution, and it's regarding the budget issues. But this is a budgetary issue. You can't. You can't. There's nothing that stops the president calling a summit or the deputy president calling an IBEC meeting to discuss these emergencies. There's nothing. But it's the casual manner in which these things have been taken. We are going to provide you some money.
That's what I'm
saying. When you are told in county that there's money coming from national government, so counties are waiting for that money. They sit back. But counties also have a responsibility. They can actually summon their county assemblies. I would have expected the county governor in Mandera get his assembly to meet immediately and allocate his budget. They all have the capacity to do that. They ought to do that.
Don't you have the problem there also with the broadside declarations like, we're going to disburse money, and then how then do we hold you accountable at the end of the day? What medium did you pass this particular information for?
But the truth of the matter is...
Yes, if there was no formal meeting, that there can be a formal truth.
No, you see, emergency money, let me tell you, those who worked in NGOs will tell you, generally this humanitarian field, emergency money is the easiest money for people to appropriate.
Absolutely.
2 years ago, when my friends were in power, in the drought, you remember, the Treasury announces we are releasing 2 billion for the emergency drought. That money became a circus. It never went to the ground, and the money just disappeared into thin air. We made a lot of noise, we kept writing about it, and nobody found it. This emergency money, this is what happens. You'll be told tomorrow, and I'm sure you'll hear about it, that 10 billion somehow was, the Treasury will say, we released the money. But then the counties will say, we haven't seen it. And they will say, we gave it to a government ministry, the ministry responsible for disaster, and the thing was spent. So this circus on disaster management, money is always there. But I think I agree with what has been said, that there is a better way of handling as a government.
Right.
I mean, don't look at what's happening to Kenyans. Forget about the fight between the government. I think the issue is about Kenyans. They should address themselves to the Kenyans.
I have a suspect, or I'm suspecting that this money has been hacked somewhere. The 10 billion shilling.
Hacking is with us now, and I wouldn't be surprised. But I was just going to say, one thing I've never worked for central government, but one thing I've noticed is that civil servants are very cautious. What they consider instruction has a form of communication, even from the presidency. They are not going to go and do something because the president said. They will be waiting for some executive order or some instrument from one of the ministers before they do anything.
Some formal communication.
So these wayside utterances are good for public relations and for political PR and so on. But usually the institutions are waiting for some executive process to be initiated. And if nothing is initiated, they know this thing won't go anywhere. But I think that it's the responsibility of each individual governor. Let's start there, for example. We have known about this El Nino forecast for how long now? Maybe more than 4 months, I think. At least 4 months, probably more. So what have they planned to do? They can't say, national government has not given us the money. You have money that's going into agriculture, into roads, into water, which will not be there if you don't do something. Or because it's going to be damaged, what else can you do then? You can't pretend we are going to put in farm inputs when the area will be flooded. So what development are you going to have? That's how you have to reallocate to put the money in, say, humanitarian activities, harvesting, water harvesting, if that is feasible. Sometimes water harvesting becomes a real challenge because there's nowhere to store it. Everywhere has more than enough water. So I really think that governors have a big role to play here. It's not made any better by the statement attributed to the DP. When you say X amount has now been released, and of course, I heard somebody yesterday say it's pitting the governors against the people. The people feel you governors have got the money, where is the money, and yet you haven't actually got from the national government. But I should ask the governors, what had you done, what had you planned for yourself? We knew that this was going to happen. You just can't fold your hands, the way I see it. Right. When I see the pictures in places like Garissa, I haven't seen the Mandera ones, and parts of the coast, cliffy, and I was saying Mombasa, but I don't know exactly what part of Mombasa. You really needed boats on the streets.
Mtopanga.
Mtopanga
area, yeah.
Okay.
But I think...
But the money has not been budgeted. Like he says, that 10 billion was a roadside story.
That's what I'm saying.
It was not budgeted. I haven't seen it in the supplementary.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not there.
Yeah, but they have been... The same Runway Guru and her team had announced in September that together with national government, they've set aside 15 billion. For the whole thing. So, but that's setting aside. It's not. I think it's not appropriated in budgets or something. I'm not sure.
Right.
The setting aside.
I have a different view on this El Nino matter. El Nino happens regularly. It's cyclic. It's every 8-10 years or so. You get some phenomenon. It's either El Nino or La Nina, and that has different effects in different parts of the world. El Nino at this time in other parts of the world, it is dry like crazy, right? Whilst you're talking about it here, El Nino is causing a different outcome in a different part of the world. And La Nina is the same. Now, because of this cyclic nature, we know what is going to happen. We know there's going to be flooding. The areas that are flooding now have not flooded. It's not the first time. They flood all the time. So why do we wait until such time as this thing is happening? Then we say we're releasing money. A responsible government plans ahead and says we expect that if El Nino happens, Mandera will be flooded. Mtopanga, I know even the last El Nino I was living in Mombasa, that same area was underwater that time. Why is there no drainage? Why isn't there for places like Mandera? Why isn't there facilities being put over time to capture that water and store it and so forth? Planning for El Nino is not about responding to an emergency. Planning for El Nino is planning to avoid the impacts of those things as before they happen. And we know they will happen. It's not as though this world is going anywhere. It is going to happen. And with more frequency now with climate change, right? And the impacts may be even more severe with the climate change happening at the moment. So I would advise the people who are talking about, we are putting so much billions there and there and whatever it is, it's too late for this particular time. All you can do is just do emergency relief. Give people food, shelter, tents, water, and stuff like that. Yeah, that's what needs to happen, and do it quickly. And those things are done effectively with people like Red Cross, whatever it is, and just say, fine, we are going to give this money to these guys, and they'll do it. And they do it very, very effectively. So all you can do now is respond to the emergency that we have. Not putting in billions to counter El Nino, no. Is to respond to the emergency. It will be over in about 3 or 4 months, right? And then we focus on the preventive measures, or in fact not even preventive, but just how can we harness El Nino to our advantage? Because water is a godsend in certain parts of the country, plenty of it. But right now we are raising hell because we have too much water.
But we thrive in chaos, and particularly because of transaction costs. Because at that time you throw procurement rules out of the window.
At this point in time, yes.
Yes. And so when you throw the procurement out the window, who benefits? God knows who.
God knows who.
That's the bottom line.
All right. Okay, so maybe the Council of Governors should be advised that was a broadside declaration, so they can put tails on that as well, because there was no formal IBEC meeting maybe to discuss this, or any sort of circulation that was put forth in terms of the budgetary. But I wanted just to raise another issue before we wind up the show that is very pertinent as well. Now that we had the circus at the JKIA, we have the CS of Transport mulling over the idea of coming up with another airport that is close to the JKIA. Question is, do we need another airport? And they said this should be a legacy project of the Ruto administration. Let's just pick up on that as well. They say the airports are very congested. This will ease the congestion at JKIA. We've had the Wilson Airport. It's never been refurbished for the longest, I should say, but it's one of the most busiest airport that we do have in Africa.
Fix the roof first. It's leaking.
Do we need
if you look at the projections, the work that was done on the current airport was enough, I think, to keep with the passengers for at least another 3 or 4 years. Right? So that needs to be fixed so that it works. For me, the biggest and most urgent item we need is a second runway.
Absolutely.
Not another terminal.
Absolutely.
Currently, if our runway has an issue, we are going to be stranded in terms of planes and everything else. So I would go and do a second runway first. Right? And the master plan for the airport is there. You can pick them and pick them in order of priority in terms of risk. Do a risk analysis. Right? And our biggest risk is runway. So they should put in the new runway, which was supposed to be in that greenfield terminal, whatever, that greenfield airport. There's a provision for a runway there that then connects across to the existing facilities. Do that first. Once that is done and you've guaranteed continuity of operations, then now you talk about building another terminal in time for the congestion of the existing one, which already, by very simple things, in fact, it can be extended. We can have a bigger arrivals area like we used to have before, so that the speed of movement through the airport is increased. And that is all that was done the other time. I think with the changes that were done in the airport over the last 2 years on terminals 1B, C, but 1B and C, was to remove all the kiosks they used to have in there, which congested the area for passengers. And now when you go there, there's a lot of seating space and everything else, so it can handle a lot more people. What you need now is to be able to increase the frequency of aircraft coming into the place. And the only way you can do that is by having a second runway.
And second runway, not an airport.
Yeah, and he's addressing the demand side. If you look at that airport, and some of you have traveled here, you go to certain airports, you see how the planes are taking on and off. They are in the waiting list to take the runway. You don't see this in Jomo Kenyatta, which means you don't need another terminal right now. What I think Patrick's bringing, and we have seen it, the cargo, the Singapore cargo plane got stuck on the runway. That messes up the runway. So the most important thing that runway is to do a second runway. And government doesn't have to do it. Do it through a PPP.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to get a penny. Get to the SACCOs. If I was in Mwalimu SACCO, I would go for it because every month we have to be paid. The government doesn't have to have a penny. That is me. When I see that Ruto plans to build a second airport, I don't want to believe that is true. And there's something somebody said called William Curry. I'm not afraid of failure, but I'm afraid of succeeding at things that don't matter at all. The things don't matter here, but we are pursuing them. This, perhaps, is something we need to step back, second runway, and we said that to Patrick, you remember.
I thought even given the scenario that we are in as a country, trying to service these debts, trying to make sure that at least we are keeping afloat in terms of expenditure, we should not be even thinking about turnkey projects like building an airport. We should shelve these things. Other jurisdictions,
that is the point that has been mentioned here, that there is enough money in the country to do some major interventions on a public-private partnership basis where the government doesn't borrow, it just facilitates.
It just facilitates.
That's all it does.
Bill Okero, should we go? Qatari was here. I think we had these conversations about building an airport that also tapered off. I don't know what really happened. It was murky. Still, there was no transparency on it. And now we're mulling over. And you'll hear there's a firm from Qatari now who will want to come and take over this particular project. Is it a revival or information that maybe they're privy to that was in the previous administration that will pick up this? Because when you see these headlines, subliminally also you have to look at what is behind the headlines. It doesn't just pop up.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Qatari was here. You remember the story of the Qatari?
They were here.
What was the story?
They wanted to really put up a very modern airport, complete with hospitals and hotels and so many things. I saw the plans at the time. But at that time, I think Mo was the chairman of KAA.
Judge Moho.
That plan, I think, failed because of the usual Kenyan problems of transparency, lack of transparency, and
it was a PPP. Was it a PPP?
Yes, it was a PPP. Yes, they would be given land, and they would. It was a BOT, I think.
BOT.
Yeah,
BOT. Build, operate, take
but it's a
over.
PPP. Concessioning kind of.
Concession,
Yeah.
But but you know, I don't know now if this is the same thing they want to do. They want Qataris to build it. Is it this new plan? Or is government to build it? I've not read the story.
The information is still scanty.
Sorry, but they did when they were working on that.
January the 15th.
When they were working on the Greenfield thing in 2015 or whatever, what they said is that at that time the capacity was about 6 million passengers per year.
Yeah.
And they said we want this thing to increase to 18 million passengers a year by 2030. And that was then, if that terminal was put up, then it would be able to handle whatever. But I'm telling you, even last year, I think lately it's been doing about 10 million passengers average per year. So it's not, the question is, it's not crowded. What I think is that it's not a priority. I think
it's not a priority.
Airports are driven by airlines. Kenya Airways itself is moribund. I think you need to first get that thing back on its feet. And today, with the economic crisis that we are in, if it's the government thinking of financing it, I think we shouldn't go that route. It's not a priority. There are many things, basic things that people in Kenya need today to survive. It's about survival, getting out of the hole we're in. I don't think it's time to look at that. But if it is a PPP where government is not going to have any financial obligation, then I don't think there's a challenge. They can do that. But if there's going to be a government financing involved, whether it's a guarantee or whatever, we should not look at it. It's not a priority. And I think these guys simply are trying to look good. These legacy things is what put us here. The SGR and all these things.
Everyone is coming with a legacy project.
Professor and those steam. These legacy things we don't want to hear about.
We ate our time.
All right, Bunyasi Sako, maybe you can help us here when it comes to PPP with the Kenya Development Corporation. This is where you should come in handy.
I think there are, there are various considerations, and those that I've mentioned are relevant, of course, that instead of outright budgetary expenditure, you can go the PPP way, and what government then would have raised can go into other areas. My own thinking, first reaction was, does GKA truly require a second airport? But my answer is no, but probably the aviation sector requires a major injection across the country. There are many, Kenya within East Africa has done very well in terms of domestic air connectivity. And that's so now potential for cargo and so on, so that we don't have to rely entirely on Nairobi. Of course, we have Mombasa doing good things at the coast. But imagine traveling between Lamu and Mombasa. You have, of course, this is not long, that's not the issue, but the capacity is really limited. Even Nairobi and Lamu, for example. Nairobi and Wajir. Wajir has one of the best runways that you can have in the country, the military one, and so on. I don't know how much its utilization is. And clearly, there's a huge potential in these more distant lands of the Republic if there was air connectivity, both for passenger, for cargo, and for for any other users as they were, including international connectivity. If you're in Marsabit, you can fly into Ethiopia. If you're in Mandera, you can fly into Somalia, Ethiopia, and other countries like that. So we have small international airports, even stood around, spreads risk, develops these different areas, gives opportunity to things that weren't there before. It doesn't have to be the capital that you do it, and certainly not at public expense. But even the PPPs, when they're done by private sector, there's an element which the state gets drawn in. Somewhere in the back of it is an implied guarantee thing that is supposed to be there, government obligations with the concurrent expenditure and so on, that draws money out of where it could have probably done something else in the same sector or different sector. So I personally, I don't know enough about the JKIA, the specificities, except the passenger projections that have been done. But I just don't think that we need a second airport. When you're in this airport, sometimes of the day, there's only a few planes on in the airport. You take off without queuing. Sometimes you queue very occasionally. Certainly there is room. There's room to do more. There are certain things I should cut out as I conclude. I noticed the other day on the domestic flights that you are bussed to your aircraft. And on one occasion, now we were being bussed from the aircraft down into the departure and arrival lounge. And there were some, murmurs from passengers, including myself. It was a distance, as we drove it, maybe 75 meters. You take that time to fill up the bus. The bus simply makes a gentle turn because it's a big bus. And before you know, you have reached at the gate. I was wondering, and I thought, maybe there are other aircraft coming and so it's for safety. No, there wasn't. Maybe somebody has a contract to do that. I mean, there are ways which you can make these things run much better at less expense and use that money to do something else somewhere else, in my view. I just think that we shouldn't be wasting money like that for now. For now, yes.
Asset utilization that you normally talk about this, but you also thinking about building it next to JKA, it should be well spread out. We should think about how do we then open up this country if you're thinking of building that particular airport next to JKIA. I think for me it doesn't make any like
had said a new terminal, so maybe they mean a terminal. I don't think they can put up a new.
The plan
I think if there have been considerations of building a new airport around Nairobi, and the biggest problem is getting the free airspace for the planes to be able to coast in and get out. There was a talk when they were doing Konza City that they'd build an airport in that area. Right. The problem is there's too many hills surrounding it. And if you look around Nairobi, there are very, very few places that are as ideal as JKIA. So you can't build another airport anywhere else for the kind of size of aircrafts around Nairobi apart from there. And that was why, in their wisdom in the old days, they actually preserved a lot of land around that area for future expansion of airports. In our traditional ways in Kenya, a lot of it was hived off by different governments and given to people. So you find that even the aircraft approach, has got a lot of industries in it already, right now.
It was
a very clever thing that you had the Nairobi National Park. I think the Nairobi National Park was not put there for any other reason as to sort of keep it so that people don't go and build. And you have a very clear place for planes to come through, yeah? But now if you look at the second runway, you've got a whole bunch of industries on the approach to the runway that could come there, plus residential areas on the opposite side of the expressway. All that will have to be removed in time. So JKIA is the right place to have any expansion of that facility, right? And I think it can be expanded for the next 20 or 30 years in the same spot, but they need to acquire a lot of the other land that is there now that has been occupied in time. Otherwise, if they're going to build anything else, it will have to be quite far from Nairobi, and you need a high-speed link into the capital city.
And it doesn't make sense for you to get more people using that airport. It's not about you must make people come to Kenya. That's it.
Yeah.
You must make people go to Dubai, and people go to Dubai. Why do they go to Dubai? They can something they can do. We must stay back. What is it we need to create to make people come here? If I was to look for the airport, I would probably extend Ukuda.
Look at more international airport.
Yes.
That can be expanded.
Yeah.
More people.
Yeah, I can Ukuda because of the south coast.
Yeah.
And therefore you are targeting the demand for the tourists. So I want to take my flight all the way from Europe or whatever and land in Ukuda. But we cannot say, well, I want one. And you step back in terms of what is informing us to do another terminal. And the CS is talking about PPP, which is great. But what is informing it? What's the demand for that airport?
Eldoret International Airport.
Exactly. We did one.
All right.
Where big planes cannot land.
Okay. I think that is a developing story. We'll see how it pans out. Even as we're looking now to wind up the show, there are two key issues that I wanted just to go back to. Now that we have Standard Chartered Bank that they've reported, they've declared the dividends, the profits right now at 9.7 billion shillings. And I know Bon Engineer used to be a former chair also of Standard. He is a big shareholder, so he's happy this morning. That's why you're missing him. Or at least at some moment, for 30 minutes, he had to hold a meeting today
to make sure that dividend is paid.
That dividend thing hasn't really checked in. But there's also a very interesting question that is being raised in that particular report that was given, that they're not looking they're not showing any flash of interest anymore, especially on the bonds and the T-bills. What is really informing this? Because we've seen many investors also, they're coming from Nairobi Security Exchange and they're going to the bonds. Just yesterday also, I think there's a 6-year this is a 6-year Treasury infrastructure bond that has been announced by the CBK. Let's just begin with you, Bill Okero. In this bond matter and the Standard, is this a bellwether of indicating where the bonds markets are headed?
Well,
and why Standard was not really interested or showing any more interest in the bonds? I don't know.
I
clarify this.
think so, because if you have looked at what is happening in the bond market, the Treasury bonds, the appetite for those bonds were not very good last year. Early this year, government, when they announced that the subscription was always below the quantity required, and the government had to keep on increasing the interest,
the extension, the coupon rate.
Yes, the coupons rates, and it went up to 18 now. I think 18%.
Indeed.
In order to attract.
Yeah.
So you get an indication that means there is a concern about the level of about confidence in government securities.
Right.
And so people asking for better yield than so, and this is really to get 18% on a government security tax free. That means if it is taxed over 23%, if that is where the government security is, then you can imagine where the commercial banks are going to go. And this is the crowding out that people, investors have complained about business. But that Standard, I've read somewhere that Standard has done away with those government bonds and have, and at a cost. In fact, they had to.
They lost a bit of money.
Just to get their money back, they lost almost 2.5 billion, just to over 2 billion. So it is worrying, because it means banks normally take that as one of the safest. Securities are one of the safest. Because this is premium, this is guaranteed. The government debt is sovereign, and so you would have thought it is the safest for any bank to take. And the returns of 18, it's wonderful.
It's a good return, yeah.
So when now the Standard Chartered says no, we are whatever, then you start thinking, do these guys know what we don't know? Are they worried about the possible default by government? I think there are concerns, really.
And I think it would be a good thing for this economy when that kind of worry sets in.
With the pullback from the bonds.
It will only be rushing for those. They'll probably be placing the money, doing their risk analysis better and placing the money in the economy.
Indeed.
To do other things,
it will stimulate the circulation of it.
It's been a very distortionary form of investment when commercial banks all rush for those T-bills and they deny monies from people taking risks in the various sectors and so on. It's very difficult to access money when that kind of thing is happening.
I think any good bank worth its salt looks at all the potential sources of revenue. You look at the risks associated with each of those, you hear sentiments around the place and that kind of stuff, and then you put your money where you're comfortable.
Right.
It's as simple as that. Yeah? And every bank has got their own risk appetite statements, whatever it is, and so forth. And there are certain levels at which there's a trigger mechanism that if it reaches here, we are out, or we are out of this, or we are in, as the case may be. Yeah. So I don't read this in isolation. I think this is an issue, and you see this is a kind of a bellwether for the banks, because the issue of how the banks rate risk and everything else when they're free on whatever it is, a lot of them, their risk processes are pretty much the same. They are not too different, but obviously the shareholders have different risk appetites that that they have, and especially if your shareholders are from outside, right? They view the country from what they hear from outside, right? You view it from inside. So international banks and local banks will also have a differently skewed risk appetites. So I think there's no simple answer to this one, because you have to be sitting in the room when they're discussing their,
what's really informed this particular
the risks
issue.
and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But it is a concern when as Bilo says, where you've got guaranteed returns. And,
that's what I'm saying. We've got guaranteed returns, and you have confidence in it, and this also is a huge source of your revenue, where you've been reporting all this supernormal profit. I mean, it's been the banks
but the good thing is
working with the government. So that's what I'm asking. Is it indicative that we're headed for tough times?
There must be some homework that bank has done.
It could even be as simple as saying, am I ethically comfortable going to that kind of level, knowing what it's going to do to the economy?
But you've been there before.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, I'm not there.
No, I'm not saying you. I mean, the bank has been there. Why are they raising issues of ethics right now? And they've been doing this for the longest time.
No, it's not raising ethics, but am I comfortable as a person to do something that is going to start pushing interest rates to the level of 25-30%, right? Purely because I am going to reap easy money.
Well, no,
certain times you get to that kind of level, especially in these days that you're talking about sustainability, whatever it is, and so forth, and shareholder sentiments and everything else. Yeah, profit itself is not a single motive. There's a whole host of other things that anybody who is operating in within the corporate world globally will consider. And sometimes you may forgo what seems as a good deal because you think that deal is going to have a negative impact on your community that you're serving.
Yeah, Geturo, I wanted to say something.
I think when a bank like that wakes up and make that decision, it's not like a question of waking up and make decisions about El Nino. They must have stepped back and thought through in perhaps what it means. And I like the point Patrick raising. Profit is one of many things. Yeah. And perhaps now there's no institution will wake up, make a decision for collapse. They must see another opportunity there. We can only speculate why they did that, but my gut feeling tells me behind they have a think tank, and that must have provided them the reason why perhaps we moved with it. And I recall one time the CEO, excuse me, was a Nigerian, and he was saying, "This is a very easy place. I just buy and I go to play golf. No, I don't have to think much." And maybe those are the things coming in.
Indeed.
There's more than just sitting there and getting.
Yeah, well, it's interesting listening to my very experienced colleagues.
Maybe you should go and buy back your bonds as well.
The thing is that for international institutions like the banks and so on, there's an interest not only of the local shareholding structure, but of the parent companies. There's certain expectations they have got in regions, in countries, and from specific institutions that they may have an interest in. So Standard Bank may also be influenced by the outside stakeholders as well, the way they see Kenya, which would be quite different from the way we see it. Patrick mentioned the ethical question, and very personally, I have very little in my mind correlation between the word bank and the word ethics. If you look at the history of the banks, some of our nationalized banks are different because they just have been set up the other day for reasons that have been expounded around our new states that have been created. But banks like Barclays, and they're linked to slavery and so on, things that they can, and so I don't want to sort of go down the line, but all around the world they have done things that are not always, really that ethical. But it's because the shareholders are demanding. They need a return, and they need a return on it. So I think all we can say is that they have, in their own rational estimation, and they are rational, they may not be ethical, but they are rational in many ways. They are analyzing the future in a way different from what we may all be perceiving, for better or for worse. That may work for them. It may work differently for another institution, including another bank, that will see it differently or sees an opportunity in it, and so on.
All right. Maybe you can also just be putting up our closing remarks briefly. And even as we are considering that, I wanted just to ask just briefly on the issue of government, to just get clarity. When is it needful for a government to consider the government-to-government procurement? Briefly. Patrick.
My view always is that there were days, in those old days when government-to-government deals worked. But in this day and age, a government's business should be to do government, not to do business. Yeah? And the only time you have a government-to-government deal is where there's a dire need of something that a country needs to kickstart its economy, right from square one. Yeah. If you remember the days of the oil crisis, the oil crisis in the 70s, Kenya got a deal in Nigeria to try and help them tide through that because the oil was really hitting the economy at that point in time. And Nigeria said, fine, we're going to give you X number of, 50 or 60,000 barrels a day that you can take. Yeah? That is a straight government deal that says we're giving you oil, which can then, you can do whatever you want with it to get money to help you as a country. So it's when you got a serious crisis that is almost existential that you get to a government-to-government deal that is out to get you out of ICU. But for normal day-to-day trading, government should stop being in business.
All right.
Completely.
Yeah, emergency issues. Yes.
So there was no existential emergency or threat that we had to go to the government-to-government deal? Briefly?
Yeah, I think the government has a responsibility to protect the vulnerable, and that doesn't happen every day. So when it sees that something and that's forward-looking, we can always call the other government to support each other and anything else.
Thank you. Bilokilo, you close
These
remarks?
others are just side shows.
Bilokilo, you close remarks.
I'm not a shareholder, so I'm okay.
No, I think when there are crises like what we have seen in Europe, with the gas problem from Russia after the Ukraine war, governments have, and during the corona epidemic, governments have intervened in the market in many different ways, whether through subsidies or whether through this kind of arrangement that we're looking at and so forth. But I think the concern in Kenya is not about why the G2G, it's about the transparency around the transactions, around these contracts, around this issue. And this is where, generally in all our matters regarding government, there's need for more clarity and more transparency.
Thank you. We just briefly, one line.
Going back to why G2G, governments have a responsibility where they sense that there are sharks that are sensing blood in the water, so they'll go for it. And therefore, the outcome of G2G must be much better than it would have been if the sharks were allowed, to go after the blood, as it were. If the outcome is different, then G2G becomes not the appropriate instrument. But in principle, I know it failed one time in the IBC procurement with France.
Indeed.
And so, but the government was saying we're going to go to G2G to avoid this rent seeking that's going to come from the private sector. It must produce an outcome better than it would have, if not
better than. So the question of the sharks really circling around the blood is the biggest question here. Right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I really appreciate you and your input this morning. I express my gratitude for that very insightful conversation we've had this morning. And also, congratulations to Safaricom that has been ranked third in Africa in terms of the best employer, first ABSA and second Standard Chartered Bank. And right now also from the telecom sector, that is Safaricom. Thank you for your valued company. You've been watching Sokoni here.